Yeah, I know. Yeah, I might bring the rest of the panel back in. I know that I can see that Nico is standing by, and hopefully John Inga is there as well. I see John Inga is there, and Philip is there, and there's everybody. Okay, great. I know it's very late, guys, so I won't drag it out for the sake of filling time, but there have been quite a lot of questions over the course of the session. But I'm going to start with a kind of a slightly open-ended but sidewinder one. We're 10 years into this. Like, some of us have been banging our heads against this brick for quite a long time. What do you think needs to happen to make it the eureka moment? Is COVID enough? Nobody. Good. Let me just.
I'll raise my
lost
arm
you for a minute, honestly.
I raised my
Okay,
arm.
go on.
Yeah, I think that in spite of having 10 years of struggle, I also believe that COVID now is really showing that gathering mobile content from regular citizens is more than just grabbing images from Facebook or Instagram or whatever we've been doing so far. Nico and Sarah and Leonor earlier today showed it very clearly how we can involve the audience in making stories in spite of us not being there. So I think COVID is maybe, well, there is a lot of talk about the game changer in the industry, and I think COVID will be one of the game changers, definitely.
Interesting. Philip, from your... Oh, sorry, Nico, you had your hand up. Go on.
I think that we are the game changer. A few minutes ago, I tweet a statement from John when he said, "Don't tell your boss that you are using a mobile phone. Don't tell you are doing mobile. Just show him how good is your visual storytelling." That's the point. I mean, big organizations have pros and cons, and we can wait the organization to change. We have to change them from inside, step by step a day. We have to believe in what we do, and we have to push for great visual content, visual storytelling. That's the key.
I will get to you, Philip, but I just follow up on that, Nico. I mean, the one question I didn't get to ask you is how many people in RAI are like you and would embrace mobile together with other cameras?
Honestly, if John is a maverick, I'm an Iceman. Like in Top Gun. I mean,
okay, I'm seeing a trend here.
We honestly are a minority, but I mean, I think I'm the only one. But I see a lot of colleagues using their phone in a way that at the end of the day, their picture go into the workflow. We have to work on that potential. We have to rise their level. We have to give them the right apps. We have to give them LumaFusion. We have to teach them FilmicPro and not just using the NTSC onboard camera. That's the point. And my classes at Rome Press Club, very often I find my own colleagues. So there is a lot of potential. We have just to work on it. And I think this emergency can be a game changer on one side. Let people understand how, like people, I mean colleagues, understanding how important is to be self-sufficient. I learned it in the crisis area. Now crisis is here, and they can learn. They can. I mean, I have a lot of people calling, and we talk on the phone. How can I record a good audio, which I have to send to the editing room for my piece? These are the leverage we have to let's say use right now.
Mm-hmm. Philip, I'm going to put you on the spot to a certain extent, but I'm going to highlight one thing that you said, which is the beauty of the made by mobile for mobile workflow. So my question to you is this: like, again, after a long time of convincing the engineers to allow mobile into the broadcast infrastructure and the whole file conversion thing from progressive to interlace happen, did we miss a trick and not realize that in fact mobile for mobile is a platform in its own right, and TV, as you do now, TV is almost like the add-on as opposed to the other side around?
I think it's very interesting the way that this has developed, and the things that have caused me to change personally, and I think certainly allowed us to establish a team, is that basically technology changes and audience behavior changes. And as long as we're cognizant of that, then I think the industry itself can change. But once we start to lose sight of how the audience is behaving and how the industry is behaving, and how technology is developing, I think that's a problem. So I think at this particular juncture, we have this where mobile should be considered a platform, and then within mobile, obviously there are all the individual platforms. So yeah, I mean, again, this hasn't happened because we designed it as such. This has happened because that's how the audience is behaving.
But I think reacting to that, exactly to say, reacting to that audience behavior change is key to survival in the current climate. Do you not think? I mean, I don't want to put people on the spot to talk about linear audience decline numbers, but I mean, the last EBU event I was at, which is a little while back, like most stations across Europe are showing 4 to 5% year-on-year decline in linear viewership. If that trend continues over 10 years, that's an awful lot of people not watching the TV anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the very nature of this story that we are all covering at the moment, which is probably the biggest story that any of us have really ever covered because of it's a global story. It's affecting every aspect of our lives. And inevitably, right now, people are consuming this story on each and every platform. TV audiences are huge. Mobile audiences are huge. The online audience is huge. People are listening to radio all the time. So suddenly, when where the appetite for the story, because of the nature of the story, it is enormous. But outside of this story, back in the life before coronavirus world, certainly observationally, and what the stats were telling us is that there are swathes of the audience in each and every demographic who are no longer watching television, no longer listening to radio, no longer even going to a sort of conventional website. All their content, all their consuming of journalism is through their phone. And suddenly the need for that content to be optimized so that they can totally appreciate it on their phone is really important. And I think that for us is still a work in progress. But thinking about how a story looks on a phone with the added conceit of having shot it on a phone, it is kind of interesting because when we're filming on a phone, although we are still filming, as I said before, in a sort of television style, you are thinking about ultimately what it's going to look like on the mobile that people are going to actually, watch it. So, interesting times. But again, I think it's audience behavior and technology, which are the drivers in this. Our job within the industry is to try to react to it, observe what the audience is telling us, try and maximize what technology allows us to do, and then see if we can bring all our expertise as storytellers, all our expertise as journalists to this sort of new space. That's the challenge for us, I think.
Would you say, or would you agree with the idea that the response from soliciting, let's call it supported UGC, like the stuff that Leonor spoke about earlier, is effectively like this huge media literacy project that might potentially have ramifications further down the line? Because what she's been doing, and I was actually involved in a similar project here, is empowering people to tell stories in exactly the same style that you have all learned as television professionals. They're seeing their content end up on screen. And if the project that Nick Garnett did with BBC Radio 5 Live with Ebola a few years ago is anything to go by, once people get a taste of that, once they understand the vocabulary of television and they understand they can do it, they tend to want to do it more. So we could effectively see an explosion in people deciding that they want to tell more stories on the local level.
I think so, and I think there's enormous potential for it. Certainly, we're doing a lot of it. What we're finding, and I can only, in comparison to how we actually teach mobile journalism, we've kind of really, if we were teaching colleagues or training colleagues or on a peer-to-peer basis, maybe we overcomplicate it, because when we're now telling members of the public that we need this, this, and this, we've completely streamlined the whole process. They get it. They understand that, with a bit of guidance, they can get, because basically the phone does a lot of the job for them. Basically, you know, point it in the right direction, hold it steady, just, you know,
hold it horizontal.
You know, what's not too hard about that? I mean, we're also in a space as well at the moment where a lot of the sensibilities, a lot of the high-end sensibilities that we apply in our work have kind of gone out of the window when it comes to, you know, you're basically after the content. And if they can give you the content, we can add the polish. But the important thing is the content, because there is no way that we're going to capture some of the extraordinary footage that's emerging, because it's absolutely happening within families or within hospitals. There's no way that we can get there, but technology is there already and humans are there. So, you know, let's use them to get the footage for us.
It's the perfect storm. John Inge, you were going to come in on that.
Yeah, because what I've noticed is that a few years ago when Leonor Suarez did her show on Astoria television, everything was marked in the top corner with fotografia des mobile, or photo with mobile. And the same thing we did in Norwegian Broadcasting with things that we got from the audience. It said private video or filmed by a mobile phone. And all those things kind of vanished now. Nobody cares about the device you use to take the image. And as Philip said, I think also the technology is playing on our side. I was doing recently, just a few weeks ago, a test drive with my phone to test the stability, what you call it, the stabilizer. Yeah, the stabilizer in the phone from an alpine slope, which is something that not even a decent gimbal would be able to compensate because of the wind and the speed and everything. So all the micro motors couldn't adjust for the frame. But the footage with the phone was so dead steady. So all those days with film, with mobile and shaky shots, those days are over. And I think we will have an enormous amount of user-generated content in the industry in the years to come.
Very good. Okay, I better start taking some questions from the panel, because, or sorry, from the audience, because I know some have come in.
Yeah, that's right.
Gisela, how are you? Hi from Ecuador. Great intervention. Do you think Mojo has also helped to involve more women in the camera job?
Yes.
Sarah, I'm going to ask you that one first. Yeah, come on, let's hear it.
Yeah. So, like, all these years that I have worked for TV, and it's quite a few years now, I have only had one female cameraman with me. And now that we are in Mojo, it's me, it's Gitta, it's Raya. So, like, the number is now 3 in MTV News alone. So, women are in Mojo more than in ENG cameras.
I've always held the same belief that when video journalism started to come into RTE, we were trying to choose a camera that would work for everybody. And we consulted a 50-50 panel of male and female journalists to get their input. And it swung on one vote, and it was one female journalist who voted for the bigger camera. So we ended up going with the bigger camera. And I remember the paradox, and I remember calling her aside afterwards saying, like we gave you a great small camera, this would fit in your handbag, why would you not take it? And she went, because the cameraman would never speak to me again. I was like, okay, wow, yeah, boom, boom. This is a true story. But I mean, it's exactly that. It's accessible. You already have it. Like, there's absolutely no barrier to entry. So it is a source of constant bewilderment to me that more and more women are not actually jumping on this, or if they are, we don't know about them. But if you're out there, please do get in touch. We'd like to hear your story. But anyway,
I actually half of. It's a small team, admittedly, but half of the team in RTE are women. And that gives us, just by having a mixed demographic, mixed in terms of male, female, mixed in terms of ages, it just really sort of, I think it gives you more scope for who tells what story, or how it gives you maybe extra degrees of insight. And certainly in terms of doing certain stories, I think there are enormous opportunities, because certainly every public service broadcaster across Europe right now, if you looked at the kind of standard audience demographic, it's pretty much 55 plus, it's skewed male, and consequently And if you think, half the world's population are women, so why isn't it evening it out? And I do think mobile journalism, just from an accessibility point of view, and for all sorts of other reasons as well. I mean, it really does open doors, and I think for women filmmakers, it's never been more important to have more women telling stories. And to me, this is the logical gateway to do that.
I thought that was one of the most interesting takeaways when I did that interview with Dima Khattab from AJ Plus. Her key message was that their workforce is 50-50 gender balanced, and pretty much every nationality in the world is represented on the team. And she said that key to diversity translates into the way that they cover stories, because there's someone who's an expert on something, on everything and every country as a result of the workforce. It's a recipe, really want to look into. Nico, you've been waiting to talk, sorry.
I want to say 3 quick things. First of all, if we have the chance later in the panel to talk about also ND filters. Sorry, something which is very important. I feel I want to say it. But coming back to the question, 2 things. First of all, until yesterday, before the crisis, we were in a deep crisis. I mean, every TVs in the world, every newspaper, every news outlet was struggling with budget. From tomorrow, honestly, we have to tell ourselves the truth, would be worse. So DJs, Mojo, and things like that will be the future, because will be a way to cut costs and to do stories otherwise would be impossible to cover because of budget reasons. About the Mojo is more inclusive, I think so, but generally speaking, less weight. Carrying less weight with you means carrying less, means working longer, gives you more of a focus. Your mind is sharper. You can work better. So it's not just it's not just a chance to include more women. It's also a chance of working. Better, longer, and without wasting energy with too much weight, which of course is something I do all the time, considering the stuff that I have behind me and I carry with me all the time.
Very good. Go ahead, Sarah.
About women, we need not only women, but women of different ages. In our case, we are all our 40s and 50s. So, but if we had girls or young ladies in their 20s or 30s, their perspective to the life is different from ours, and that would give more views than the old ladies like myself can do.
Yeah, I think age diversity is also really, really important. I think you're absolutely right on that. Yeah. Let's take some more questions. That's okay. So Jason Rendon for the panel. When you go out and about to cover a story, do you ad hoc filming? Do you ad hoc film of an event, or do you have a basic outline, a storyboard that you follow that guides or helps you decide what to film? So do you shoot ad hoc or do you storyboard? Go, John Inga, yeah.
I'll start with that one, because when I was fresh as a TV journalist many years ago, I won't even mention how many, I tried to figure out the story in advance. And then every time I came out in the real world working with news, and suddenly it appeared to me that the story is not what I thought it was when I jotted down the storyboard. So I needed some way to adapt into reality and not into trying to describe the world as I would like it to be. So I shoot it mostly ad hoc, but I always search, and that's part of the experience. You start searching for the good sound bites, the short sentences, the sound you can make the edit within. And also when people say something, if they answer in 35-40 seconds length of the answer, then you reframe your question and ask it once again. And you also include, could you please say it a little shorter, and force the interviewee to actually be within 17 seconds. So I don't use storyboard anymore, but I had the storyboard in my head. And the good thing about being a VJ is that when I'm done filming, I know what's on the rushes, so I know how to edit.
Yeah, that's the benefit of self-shooting, effectively, isn't it? You already know exactly what you have in the can, so to speak. Philip, do you have tuppence to throw into that one? Sarah, I'll come to you. Yeah.
No, I definitely identify with what John was saying there. For me, it's at this stage, having shot hundreds and hundreds of stories, it's quite an organic process. I think I don't storyboard, or if I do storyboard, it's a very loose storyboard in my head. You're open to ideas as to how the story might develop. And I think what John says about sort of hearing sound bites and knowing you're going to use them almost as you record them, I can definitely identify with that. You know, you're looking for those little nuggets as you film that you know are going to make the edit. And I think there's nothing wrong with storyboarding. It's just not something I do. And I have to say, actually, for the kind of stories that we do, if you break down a news report doesn't necessarily need that many constituent parts. But it certainly helps if you can, you know, the basics, that you know that you have a certain amount of time, a certain amount of material that you need, but you don't necessarily have to overthink it, I don't think.
Sarah, you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, I always have some kind of a thought. I have like pre-written script in my head when I go out, and then it might be the case, or the real world is totally different. But you know, you need to rule to break the rule, so sort of thing. So I always start with an idea, and if the real world doesn't support my idea, I change my idea.
Yeah, I think that's a very good pragmatic approach. Yeah, Nico, what's your take? Do you go out with a storyboard, or do you?
Yeah, storyboard is in my mind, but I know that the moment you go on the field, the moment you meet the people, there is something which has changed, or there is something you didn't expect, and there is that spark which goes into your mind. You understand something new, and you want to do it differently. But again, controlling the process, shooting and then editing makes everything, I mean, a lot easier. People think that one-man show is complicated. Indeed, it is. But at the end of the day, it's a lot easier, because you know which picture you have when you are going to write your piece, and you know which picture you have, and which text and which quotes you have when you are going to edit.
Very good. Okay, let's take another panel question. Skip Hunt again. A question for everyone who's still editing on a laptop versus using LumaFusion. Everyone kind of edited on the go there as we went. But anyway, yeah, John Inge, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I do both, of course. And it's pretty much like when I use the camera. I use every camera that works. And when I edit on the device I have in hand, and that works. So I edit on Mac. I use iMovie. I use Premiere Pro. I use LumaFusion on the phone. Well, if it works, I'll use it. Everything to get the story out.
That's a sensible approach, Philip. I think you've already intimated that you work predominantly in LumaFusion on an iPad Pro. Do you still use Avid in the newsroom as well, or are you pretty much now LumaFusion all the way?
Avid is the predominant system in the newsroom, but it's not part of our workflow. So that's because everything that we're doing, its original stories, we're creating it. So it wouldn't make much sense for us to absorb stuff that's in the newsroom system already and bring it into our system, just from a workflow perspective. So for a long time, when I was starting in Mojo, I always used to film on the phone and then edit on a laptop. And I have to say, the arrival of LumaFusion, which to my mind is effectively a desktop editor on a mobile device, was the kind of the light bulb moment where I thought, actually, I don't need to edit on a laptop anymore, because basically I've got all the capabilities now on my device.
Yeah, very good. Sarah, I think you mentioned that you like last night, for instance, you said that you cut on the laptop, but you also have the option of cutting on the phone as suits. So would you also be a pragmatist and just adapt to the situation?
Yes, of course. Like yesterday, I just had to, because I was too tired. I couldn't hit my finger to the right spot. But I prefer LumaFusion simply because I know it best. I'm a sort of a beginner with Premiere Pro.
Okay, well, that's a good answer as well. Okay, let's take another question. So Alan, he says, for journalistic reasons, don't we still have to distinguish whether it was shot by a journalist or a citizen? Anybody?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm just coming in on that one. Sorry. We are crediting, or there would be a courtesy credit to sort of, or there may be a way of scripting it that would let the audience know that this wasn't us who was filming it. So I think that's a sort of journalistic sensibility in all of this. But right now, there are effectively whole programs being put together from UGC, and obviously you can't just keep, putting up courtesies throughout it all. So I think that's one of the things that maybe the industry will have to address on the other side of this, if we get to a point where just the wide use and wide acceptance of UGC just becomes the norm because of the crisis that we're in.
I think you. Well,
go ahead, John. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think you will spot the difference, and mostly because packages shot by journalists and photographers will be edited, and it will be a completely different style, and you have a tone, a voice, a way to do it. But already today we are not crediting citizens. It says the name of the citizen, and we are not a big country, so most people know who works with the story, and when they hear my voice, they usually recognize my footage as well. And if I use other people's footage, of course I would have the name of that people, but it rarely says shot by a citizen, unless it's kind of hidden camera and private eye, and yeah.
Interesting. Nico, any comments on that one?
Yes, the war in Syria changed everything, because the conflict in Syria was the first big event which was impossible to be covered on the field. On one side, you had Al-Qaeda and ISIS. On the other side, you had the government who didn't release any visas to go on the field. So the big, AP, Reuters, the big news wires started putting in the wire user-generated content, saying we can't independently verify that it was shot in Aleppo that day and blah, blah, blah. After a few months, the situation didn't change. So EBU, included EBU, European Broadcasting Union, they put together staff only to check that type of, to verify those video sources. And the same thing is happening now. Of course, as a journalist, we have to declare that it's not something we have done, and we have to verify that footage. But it's part of the game. There is another question in the flow saying, what about, interviews and Zoom? That's the same thing. But what makes the difference? Learning shots. The way we put everything together has to be done in a professional way.
I would certainly say my observation in the amount of stuff that we've seen on our television sets, I would certainly prefer to see stuff that's shot on phone than what seems to have now become the standard Skype interview setup, where it's badly framed and you're looking up someone's nostrils, and
yes,
my preference every day will be for the stuff that's shot on a phone, I'm afraid.
Yeah, those Skype interviews, I've been trying to say that it's our responsibility as a journalist to advise the person we are interviewing. Could you please stand up or go lower, whatever, so that the shot looks nice. So it's really terrible, and I'm sure that the interviewees don't enjoy seeing like showing off their nostrils or something. So it would be really like proper good behavior from us to like advise them how to be.
To get the best result. Okay, let's take one more question from the audience and then we may wrap it up. Johan Johnson, what's your opinion on shooting editing in 1:1 aspect ratio to use on multiple platforms? Ooh, interesting.
I don't have an opinion.
You don't have an opinion on that one, okay. I think, Philip, you'd said that you occasionally version 2 OneOne, but you very rarely shoot OneOne, I'm presuming.
We wouldn't shoot OneOne because, again, there's an expectation that our stories may end up on television, and 16:9 gives you a lot of versatility to satisfy the needs of all the platforms. For a while, the platforms were telling us that OneOne was their preferred version. Certainly Facebook was OneOne preference for a long time. But then they pivot themselves. Where to a degree, we are, we're hostage to what the platforms decide to do. And certainly my perception from what the platforms seem to be asking for nowadays is effectively vertical video. Because they want people to use the maximum real estate of their phone when and nobody turns their phone anymore. So OneOne could be seen as a compromise, but I think the game has slightly moved on from the world of OneOne. But if you needed to have to do something and just do one thing, then maybe OneOne is still a good option.
OneOne in 4K. Sorry, Quentin.
I think if you have your storyboard and your outline scripted before you go out to shoot, and you know where it's going to be published, maybe OneOne is the way to do it. But then you have a lot of rushes that is not possible to use anywhere else. So OneOne in edit maybe as a version, but not in shooting. And with 4K, of course, you can expand into it. And I would like to, I see the time is running out, but I would like to emphasize one thing about the training and the failing that you do, because we do a lot of things in Norwegian broadcasting and in every broadcasting station, I guess, and then we just take one step back and say, we failed. But alas, there is no need to be afraid of failing. And I took a shot of a boat in the harbor the other day, and it gives a lot of hope. If you have, it's possible to have a boat called No Problem 2.
I wonder what happened to No Problem 1, though. Exactly. That's the question, right?
That was my thought.
That was a problem.
It's very difficult for me to listen to, honestly, to Phil Bromwell talking, because I always think Phil is on a airplane on the hills of Dublin looking for the wind phone. That's which is its most famous and most beautiful piece, I think. But one by one, I don't know. I think it's nowadays it's very complicated, because you want to go vertical, you want to go square, you have to go 16:9. I suggested also a function in FilmicPro which can help this. I mean, with framing. I think it's mostly about your market. Let's say if you are in the fashion industry, or you want to talk to that niche, that market niche, you have to go one by one in vertical, because Instagram is going to be your platform of choice. So it's not just a matter of technical choices. I think it's also a matter of reaching the public, finding your public and reaching it.
Very good. Okay, we have run out of time for tonight. I was going to give you the nice deep philosophical one of, where will we be in 5 years' time? What would your starting advice to someone starting out be? But we're not going to get to any of those. And we were going to talk about ND filters, Nico. Do you want to take the last 30 seconds and just talk about ND filters?
Yes, very quickly. I was one of those saying, okay, no filter. I'm not a photographer. It's too complicated. Instead, a camera phone is a pinhole camera. So you need to, especially in a very sunny and bright environment like Kabul, Athens, and South Italy in the summer and so on, you need small ND filters. So to keep the shutter speed at 150 if you are in the PAL world, or 160 if you are in the NTSC world. So they are crucial. They make the difference. Otherwise, you are going to say, but it's not good. In fact, if the shutter speed is very fast, the picture are like shaking. So it's a little thing, but makes the difference. And it's not that, they are not that expensive and not complicated to be used. Just do a few dry runs at home before starting. And 150 will help you, or 160 will help you to achieve great shots.
Very good. If you're interested in this idea, and we've had several comments from people saying that they are interested to learn more about ND filters, I would direct you back to the filmmaking panel from last week, where the likes of Richard Lackey in particular, but others also, spoke at some length about what ND does to give you control basically over the exposure on a phone, and how that gives you what's known as the cinematic look, actually. So if you're interested in that, please do go back and look at it. It's available for catch up. If you go to our website, you can just scroll down and see the speakers from week 1 and watch the playback. But that brings the second session for tonight to a close. I from the deepest part of my heart, I want to thank each of you for joining me this evening and for sharing your insights and your knowledge so graciously and at such a late hour. That gang in Seattle, you see, it's just lunchtime for them. But anyway, it's all good. The last week is anything to go by. The amount of playbacks will be colossal. So I'm really looking forward to see how this resonates with the audience tomorrow. But I hugely appreciate your insights, guys, and for taking the time to join us this evening. It's been a pleasure, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenn. You were a great host. I look forward to see you all in London at Mojo Fest.
Fingers crossed. Someone let me know when it's happening. I have no idea, but anyway, we'll just leave it at that. Okay. And thank you, guys. And to you at home, thank you so much for joining us and being with us for the two and a bit hours. It's been an intense day, lots of stuff covered again. But do remember that this video will be available for catch up very, very soon on both the LumaTouch and also on the Filmic YouTube channels. Thank you for your participation and for your questions. I know there's been a lot of conversation in the chat room on both channels tonight. An unfortunate amount of trolling as well, but I'm afraid that's the nature of live. We have to just grin and bear. And on that bombshell, I'll bid you adieu until next Friday night, and hope to see you then again.